All right, Mother, you've lived in a lot of places during your life. Some of them you remember, some of them you probably don't, such as where you were born and such. But if you could give us a list of those places that you've lived, it would be much appreciated.
All right. Well, I was born in England because my parents were married in England. My mother English, my father was American. They were actually married in Thetford, and they lived in Thetford for a while. And then when my mother became pregnant with me, they moved down to Bournemouth and lived with my mother's parents the idea was that they would be supportive and take care of my mother while she was pregnant and then help with the baby afterwards. So anyway, I was born in Bournemouth, where they lived. And we lived there for a while. Actually, my father didn't live there. My father was in the military at the time, and he would come down on weekends and stay. But he and my grandmother, my mother's mother, did not get along at all. And so finally the situation deteriorated to the point where my mother called up her aunt, Auntie Louisa, who lived in London, and said, you know, I can't live here anymore. And so Auntie Lou, who at the time, due to some very shrewd investments, owned, I believe it was 2 Georgian houses at the time, which she had converted into flats. They were completely rented out. But she told my mother, I will send you a telegram when you can come. And as it turned out, she went to one of the people who were living in one of her flats and said, you're going to have to move. I'll find you a place. And she found them a place and moved them out that day and sent my mother a one-word telegram saying, come. And so my mother caught the train to London, and actually it was very sad because my grandfather, her father, did not want her to leave at all and tried to persuade her not to go, but she said, you know, I really can't stay. And he said, and it turned out to be quite true, he told her, I will not ever see you again. And it was true because he died that December, yes. Anyway, so my mother and I went up to England on the train, and went up to London on the train, and were met by Auntie Lou, and we lived in a flat in her place for some time. How long did we live there? Lived there for 10 months. And of course it was right after the war, so there was a lot of rationing, and my mother said that it was very sweet because even though there was a lot of rationing and coal was very hard to come by, that everybody in the other flats, I think there were 5 other flats in the Georgian house that my aunt had converted, everyone contributed a little coal to my mother so that she could keep the place warm for me, which I thought was very sweet. Anyway.
Do you know where the houses were in London?
No, I don't. And my mother can't tell me now. So anyway, we lived there for 10 months, and then in April of 1946, my mother and I sailed to the U.S. on the Queen Mary. And we were met in Brooklyn by my father and his father, and then we moved in with his parents in Brooklyn and lived there for a while. And unfortunately, my grandmother, my father's mother, was also a very difficult person to get along with, and so that was not a real pleasant situation. And housing at that time, because it was, you know, immediately after the war.
Do you remember where in Brooklyn?
80 Celeste Court.
In
Brooklyn.
Near Sheepshead Bay?
Near Sheepshead Bay, yes. Garretson Beach. Anyway, housing was at a premium then. You literally could not go out and just get a house. And so my parents were on a waiting list for housing. And it looked like it was going to be quite a while before a house came through for them. And so my father suggested to my mother that she go back to England until, you know, things improved. I saw that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. No, I had asked about that. No, they're not going to take them, I'm afraid. Yeah. It's a real shame, but, you know, they've already got 3, and theirs are pregnant, so, you know. Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm real sorry, because I understand they're very nice llamas, but, yeah. Yeah. No, we're not. Take care. Okay, I forgot where I was. Oh, okay, I got it. Okay, so as I said, housing was at a premium after the war in the U.S. and other places as well, but in the U.S. And so my father suggested to my mother that she return to England because it looked like it was going to be a while before a house became available for them. As it turned out, my mother had met the priest at my grandparents' who was the priest at my grandparents' church, and when he asked how they were doing and where they were living, and my mother said that they were living with my grandparents, he said, "Oh no, that will not do." And apparently he put a word to the housing people and said, "You need to move this family up. They need to get out of that situation," because my grandmother was well known. But my parents didn't know that, and so they booked passage. My father booked passage for my mother and me on a Dutch ship, the VFMD-F, and we set sail for London in February or March, which is not a real great time to cross the Atlantic. There's a lot of heavy storms then, and as it turned out, we ran into a very heavy storm. It was such a big storm that the sailors came around and they literally battened down all of the portholes and bolted them on and forbid the passengers to leave their rooms. And my mother said that she didn't get to sleep at all that night because all night long she could hear the waves just crashing on the decks above, and the ship, of course, was just plunging up and down. So I'm really glad that I don't remember any of that and that I was not cognizant of it at the time. But anyway, the storm abated, and my mother and I got to England, and we were just fine. And so we went down to visit my grandmother, who was a widow by then because my grandfather had passed away, as I said, in December. And didn't spend very long down there, just spent a few days down there, and then came back and spent the remainder of the time with Auntie Lou, and came back to the U.S. in July. And by that time, there was a place available for us. It was not much of a place, but then it was a place of our own, in a place called Shanks Village. And it was called Shanks Village because there were lots and lots of ex-military people there, and it was lots and lots of families. It would be, I'm sure, what would be considered now to be extremely low-income housing. But anyway, there were lots of families there. And so we.
A shank to me is something that you use to somebody in prison.
Well, I don't know why. I think it was called Shanks because of, Shanks is another word for I think for your legs, because they talk about Shanks Mere, and if you use Shanks Mere, it means you walk someplace. And I think the idea that it was people there had very little money, and so they walked places rather than driving or whatever. Anyway, they lived there for a while, and then while they were there, my father got his degree from MIT, and I was thinking that they lived in Boston, but I have absolutely no recollection of Boston at all, so maybe he commuted from Shanks Village, because, as I said, he got his degree in 1947. So, as I said, they lived in Shanks Village for a while. My sister was born. My sister was born in New York, and then my mother was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and so my parents decided that my sister, who was about a year old at the time, would go and live with my father's parents in Brooklyn, and I would go and live with my Aunt Olive in England. And so Aunt Olive came over, and we had my 5th birthday party outside in Shanks Village, because I remember a great big long picnic table, and all the kids in Shanks Village were invited, and we have pictures of my aunt, serving the kids cake and ice cream, and lots of little, grubby-faced kids, including me, having a good time. So anyway, very shortly after that, my aunt took me onto some ship or other, the Coronia. She took me on the Coronia, and we sailed for England. And I lived in England with my aunt for a year while my mother was in the sanatorium. And then my mother was pronounced well, and so she sent for me. And my aunt put me on the plane, and I flew back to New York, and I went to kindergarten in England, in a convent school. And then when I went back to New York, I went to first grade in New York, and my parents at that time had bought a nice little house in Pearl River, New York, and so I went to first grade in Pearl River. And then my father was transferred to Ohio, to Columbus, Ohio, and so we moved into an old brownstone house, a big 2-story house. Actually, it was multiple stories because it had a full basement, the first floor, the second floor, and a full attic. So it was quite a place. Anyway, it was 1266 Bryden Road was the address. We were there 2 years. I went to 2nd and 3rd grade in Ohio.
How do you spell Bryd?
B-R-Y-D. And then my father got orders again, and we moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we lived in military housing for a year, and I went to 4th grade in a military school. And then my parents decided to move again, and so they moved again, even though we were still in Albuquerque, but we moved to a different house, and it was a different school district, so I went to a different school. So that was 5th grade. And then my father got orders again, and we moved to Sacramento, and I went to 6th grade in Sacramento.
Sacramento, California.
Sacramento, California, yes. I don't know if there are other Sacramentos.
Well, I don't know, but who knows who's going to be listening to this in the future.
That's true. So anyway, lived there for a year, and then my father got orders again to go to Japan, and so we went to Japan, sailed over on the Patrick, the USS Patrick, I think, was a military ship that was painted all gray and everything.
Do you know the address in Sacramento?
6101 Deed Court in Sacramento.
Thank you.
Went to Japan, lived right outside Yokota Air Force Base in Japan.
What's Yokota near?
That is a good question. I don't know. I think it's about 50 miles from Tokyo, if that's any help.
That is a help, thank you.
We were there for 2 years. I went to 7th and 8th grade school in Japan. And that was probably my best school experience, was 7th and 8th grade in Japan. It was a small enough group that we all knew each other, and we had a really good time hanging out together. So that was really good. Anyway, then my father got orders again, and we went back to Virginia. And we first lived in Springfield, Virginia. And I went to 9th grade to a school called Lee High School, which was quite a shock because it was a big high school and totally different. And it was a wealthy area. That the suburbs of Virginia, there were a lot of the people there were government people and so forth, and had substantial income. Anyway, so I went to Lee High School in my 9th
I guess some things
grade.
don't change.
Some things don't change, that's right. And then my folks moved again. They moved to Annandale, Virginia, and I went to 10th, 11th, and 12th grade in Annandale. And then after that...
Was that a suburb too?
Yeah, it was a suburb too. That was about 13, 14 miles outside of Washington, D.C.
Did he work in Washington, D.C., your father?
Did he work in Washington, D.C.? I don't know. He was still in the military at the time, so I don't know. He didn't talk about his work, so I don't really know.
So after Virginia?
So after Virginia, my father got orders again. We moved out to California, to Riverside, California, and I went to UC Riverside. And I've lived in California the rest of my life.
Well, tell us about California. Where'd you go after Riverside?
Well, I got married in my sophomore year and lived in Riverside for a while. And then my ex-husband got a job in Santa Cruz teaching. And so I moved to Santa Cruz and lived in Santa Cruz for a few years, from 79 to, couldn't have been 79. 79?
You left in 79.
I left in 79, that's right. When did we move there? We moved there when he graduated. Anyway, we moved to Santa Cruz. We were there for a few years, and then...
It wasn't Santa Cruz, that was Ben Lomond. No, that was...
It was Santa Cruz. Started out in Santa Cruz, and then my ex-husband and I got divorced in 75, and I met Jimmy, and we got married in 76, and Justin was born in 77, and we left in 79.
But when did you live in Ben Lomond?
Lived in Ben Lomond right after you were born, so that would have been like 78. From 78 to September of 79. We left Ben Lomond in September of 79 and moved to Marysville.
Do you remember the address of Ben Lomond?
345 Condor Avenue in Ben Lomond.
All right.
And then we moved to Marysville, and we moved to Marysville in September, and it was quite a shock of 79.
All right.
It was quite a shock because Ben Lomond was cool and damp and very shady. And Marysville in September is really, really hot. I thought I was going to die, actually. Anyway, but eventually I adapted to it. We lived in Marysville for a year. And
do you remember the address in Marysville?
it was on Arthur Street. 1125 Arthur.
1125 Arthur Street.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so, anyway, we decided to build a place of our own, and we did. Bought some land up in Oregon House and built our house. And in December of 1980, we moved into our house in Oregon House. Justin had his third birthday in Marysville, and the following week we moved and moved into our house in Oregon House. And my father arrived immediately. He came up to visit us and spent a week with us. There was boxes and furniture all over the place, but he wanted to see the place, and so he came up.
What did he think?
I don't know.
He didn't share his opinion with you?
He may have, but I don't remember.
He's not one that kept his opinion to himself.
True. Anyway, and so we have lived in the same house since 1980, December 1980, and this is now February 2013. It's a long time.
It is a long time. Thank you for the history of the place that you live.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Now, can you tell us a little about the project that we see in front of us here?
The project that we see in front of us here is we are planting our own small orchard, and it will consist, at least at this point in time, of 11 fruit trees. We have 2 cherry trees, 4 apple trees, a plum tree, a nectarine, a peach, a persimmon. Have I gotten to 11 yet?
I don't know. I wasn't keeping track.
I think we have.
And which one is this?
This is a cherry tree. This is a sour cherry tree. This is a Montmorency sour cherry tree.
What's it again?
It is a Montmorency sour cherry tree. There's sweet cherries and sour cherries. Sour cherries are what you use for making pies, and sweet cherries you eat, just as is.
All right. And then over here, you put a bunch of wire in. I'm a little skeptical about this, but...
Yeah, well, we're going to go find out more about the wire, but I think the wire is good because of gophers. And during the summer, this whole area is absolutely riddled with gopher mounds.
You got to come closer otherwise.
I'm sorry. That whole area is riddled with gopher mounds. So it seems like a good idea to try and protect the trees until they get a bit bigger. So we've got a cherry tree here. This will be an apple tree, another apple tree, and then either the peach or the nectarine or the persimmon or the plum or whatever. But it's going to be 2 apples and 2 apples, and then the remainder of the trees.
Which one are you over here?
There'll be, this is an empire apple.
Hold on, slow down. So
this will be an empire apple tree.
This is an empire apple tree with a wire here. And again, I'm skeptical about the wire, but anyway.
And then that'll be a Granny Smith apple
Granny
tree.
Smith.
And then over there,
Well, let's do one row at a time.
Okay, so Empire, Granny Smith, and then I forget, peach or nectarine down there.
Okay.
There'll be a peach and a nectarine. They may not both be there, but, that'll be it.
Okay.
And then over here,
hold on, let me catch up here. Okay.
There'll be another Empire apple tree. Then there'll be a Hudson's Golden Gem apple tree. And then there'll be a plum tree and a persimmon tree. Oh, and another cherry tree, the sweet cherry tree.
All right.
And it may not be in exactly that order, but the apples are going to be in that order. I have to consult my list to see what is going.
All right, well, the soil's crap, but...
Added a lot of stuff to it, so hopefully it'll be okay.
Yeah. We've added a lot. We've dug deep holes. So,
you can see the difference between the decent soil and the awful soil.
I don't know if the camera can.
Oh, maybe not.
I can. All right. I'm going to look at the chickens real quick with the camera.
Okay, I'll go give Pete a call, okay?
All right.
You're going to go with me, aren't you?
Yeah. I'll go up there with you to pick up the wire stuff.
I'll get a couple of them right now.
Thank you for the interview. This is the current crop of chickens. The bluish colored chickens are the Andalusians. And various reds, Rhode Island reds, and some other reds. I can't remember all the different red varieties, but that's what they are. And the current cars in the front of the house.